You and I have to look at this and understand this, that the ballot is as powerful as the bullet.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 68 of Only Human. Today we're going to take a hard look at the difference between two words that sound a lot alike: planning and preparation. We often use these words interchangeably, but they have radically different implications in the real world. If we don't understand the difference, we can get ourselves in trouble in a big hurry. So today we want to sort that out for you. Most people are taught and most people believe that if they have a plan, a really good plan for whatever they want to achieve, that's enough, right? But I will tell you, as an experienced pilot and crisis manager, plans fail, and they fail all the time. And they fail for a lot of different reasons. We'll talk briefly about that today. But when plans fail, what keeps us moving toward our objective is our previous preparation. And today we're going to break down why preparation outperforms planning almost all the time. And that's especially true when things go sideways. So we're going to start like we often do with our Blue Threat Proverb of the Week. And today it's Blue Threat Proverb 48. Preparedness beats planning. And the subtext there, as you can see on the poster, which, by the way, you can buy from Convergent Performance if you'd like to get this poster series. It says, plans assume order and consistency. Preparation prepares you for chaos when your assumptions are wrong. So let's start out with a little bit more of a discussion about planning before we get into why it doesn't always work. Planning is about creating a structured approach to achieve a specific goal. But it assumes a predictable environment, right? When we're planning something, a trip, a vacation, right? We're planning that our car will get us to the airport, the planes run on time, that our hotel reservation will be good, that the weather will stay as forecast, right? When any one of those things goes sideways, a lot of our plans kind of go out the window. And so we get really, really frustrated when plans don't work, especially if we don't have anything to fall back on, which we'll get to in a minute. But why is it that we love plans so much when we know that they frequently fail? Because as humans, the pinnacle of God's creation here on earth at least, we crave order and control, right? Our business life, our personal life, previously before in the military, my military life, they all advocate, maybe even require, structured approaches to be successful. And when we have structured approaches, we need a plan because a plan will provide clarity. They'll help us do things like schedule and allow us to bring the resources we need together at the right time. Bottom line, plans are a roadmap, right? But here's where the fatal flaw in planning comes in. Assumptions drive plans. For example, resources will be available. People will act as expected, and events will unflow logically, right? That's what we rely on for a plan. And most of the time, that's enough, and most of the time, it's true. I mean, I think it was former President Eisenhower, I think, that said, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. So I'm not knocking plans entirely here. What I'm, much like Eisenhower said, if that's who said it, we need to plan because that provides us that order, that structure, that scheduling function that we need to move forward. You guys know I'm a military historian. There's military blunders aplenty that I could quote, but one of them that I think is known to most was something called the Maginot Line, right? That was France's World War II defensive plan. They built this huge wall and tanks all over it and ditches and all this other stuff because they knew how the Germans were going to attack because they just had a world war with them, right? Spoiler, the Germans are tricky people and they didn't attack the same way. And the Maginot Line was a waste of vast resources and eventually resulted in the waste of millions and millions of lives. Right? So plans don't always work. You got that. Let's talk about what I really want to talk about today, and that's the real power in preparation. Right? Preparation, if I could define it in Tony terms, is about building readiness for the unknown and the unexpected. Okay? I'll give you a classic example right here from the Emerald Star Ranch in Texas. I didn't know a lot about snakes when I came down here. I mean, I grew up in Michigan, and we had a few different kinds of snakes, and the bad ones would rattle, right? Rattlesnakes. But that's about all I knew. I didn't like any of them, right? You come down here to Texas, and there are snakes aplenty, all kinds of different types of snakes. Yes, we have rattlesnakes, but we also have eastern coral snakes, which are like the second most deadliest and venomous snake in the world. But then we got all kinds of other snakes, big ones. We got cottonmouths and a few other poisonous types down here, but you've got big rat snakes and all kinds of other snakes, and they're good snakes. Right? So I had to, you can never plan to encounter a snake. Now I have a little bit of a plan. I got a little snake grabber that I keep down by my house, and I've grabbed quite a few of them with it. Some mean ones and poisonous ones and some nice ones. But I had to learn and prepare myself in a variety of different ways because you can't ever plan on encountering a snake. When you see it, it's probably in a spot you didn't anticipate at a moment you didn't plan for. So you have to be able to do certain things. And we'll walk through what those certain things are, those levels of preparedness here in just a minute. What I want to do is I want to bring up another image here. And this image is almost a direct image of the things that I talk about in my recent book, Armored Knight, The Relentless Pursuit of Resolve, Resilience, and Recovery from Life's Challenges. The Armored Knight book, and please, it's out there. It's selling okay, but I'd like to sell a few more, and I'd sure like some people to write some Amazon reviews about it. I spent a long time putting this book together. It is front to back all about preparation, right? Preparation that promotes readiness. So I want to talk a little bit about what would full-scale personal readiness look like and how do you prepare for it. So you should have up on your screen now the Armored Knight shield. And you can see it looks like a shield, but there's a lot of words all over it. And I want to walk through these using a metaphor that's a little bit better here for the video on the podcast with my fingers, right? And let's just work the planks from top to bottom. And let's start with, what does mental preparation look like? And I'm going to use my thumb, my opposable thumb here, as mental. And the reason I do that is because the thumb decides what all these other fingers do. Without the thumb, these other fingers are pretty useless, and then unless you're poking something, right? So back to my dilemma with the various types of snakes in Texas. My mental preparation is knowledge. First thing I have to do is learn how to recognize them. And you do that by studying what snakes look like. And you see that in 2 dimensions on a picture book about the snakes of Texas, right? But then when you see one in the wild, I opened up my chicken coop about 2 months ago, and there was a big, big snake that quickly slithered behind the nesting boxes. Right? Can't leave it in there if for no other reason he's going to eat all the eggs, or she. So I'm eventually going to have to slide the nesting boxes out, right? Which means getting my hands down there within about 14 inches, 15 inches of this this snake that I know is there, and then figure out what to do about it. So snake didn't rattle, but not all rattlesnakes rattle. It was definitely brown. All rattlesnakes are brown, but so are other types of snakes. So mentally, I'm thinking this might be a bad snake, but it probably isn't, right? Back to my little snake grabber tool. I have a plan to be able to reach out and capture this snake with a 4-foot long thing with little grabbers on the end, and you squeeze the handle up here. The grabbers close around the snake, and then you got to make sure you hold onto it tight because he's coming out, right? And so I go get that thing. I pull the nesting boxes back. I reach in there. I see it. Now I know this is a big rat snake. He's about 6 feet long, about that big around. And I get him right behind the head. He's not happy. And when I try to drag him out, he's fighting and trying to grab hold of anything he can grab hold of. And I'm talking to him, and I get him out of the coop, and I take him over by the fence. I let him go. He slithers away back in the woods. All of that was because I was mentally prepared to have that encounter, right? So you have to know things, and you have to have the ability in real time to tie into any planning that you have done. For example, having my snake grabber nearby. All right, let's go down a step to the next plank, which is physical. Physical readiness is something that is really, really critical to all of us, and something that's critical to our society, because over the last 30 years, we've become sedentary, lazy. Nearly half of America or more is obese. We don't get the types of stretching exercise. We don't eat the right foods. And so we don't live as long as we could, and we don't live as fruitfully as we could during the years that we do live. So physical readiness is about all of it. Do you get enough sleep? Did you get enough sleep last night, right? Fatigue makes cowards of us all, right? So luckily when I encountered that snake, I was coming off a pretty good night's sleep, and my brain was working, my body was working. I was able to have the physical capability to capture that snake and remove it and safely release it into the wild. But our physical readiness is something you can never take for granted, and there's a lot of things that we can do to promote it. Recently, there's been this whole big effort to, cure all obesity with Ozempic. If that's what your doctor says is good for you, that's great. I just think when you take shots to reduce fat, all you end up is with being an unhealthy, skinny person. So I'm old school. I believe in, weightlifting, getting some aerobic exercise, eating the right foods, getting enough rest, staying hydrated, all those things that since the days that I got my presidential physical fitness patch in 5th grade, something they really need to bring back, by the way, I've tried to pay attention to. So we've talked about mental preparation and physical preparation. Now let's get to the next one, which is behavioral. When we're talking about behavioral preparation, so I'm going mental with my thumb, physical with my strong index finger, behavioral with my middle finger. I have to be careful with this one, because given the wrong angle, you might think I was trying to say something. But I do think the middle finger works well for behavioral, because it's all about our habits and how we respond to things based on routine and practice and all of those things. So behaviorally, do I know that I have the capability to be able to sort out what's going on in the chicken coop, or do I run away screaming to my wife and have her come handle a snake for me? Right? That would probably be a big turnoff for her. But no, I've thought about this, and I've seen enough snakes around here that I've got my plan, I've got my tool. I'm very careful, and I'm starting to run an internal mental checklist, because behaviorally, I've decided how I have to do that, right? I have to get within reach. I have to have the animal pretty calm. I've got to be able to get my my pincers down on its body somewhere, preferably close to the head, so that he can't reach up on that 40-inch long stick and get at me. And I certainly don't want to trip or fall going away once I have this 20-pound writhing reptile in my grasp. Behavioral performance, behavioral preparation is all about building good habits and eliminating as many bad habits as we can. We've talked about habit formation in the past, so I'm not going to dwell on it here. But middle finger is your behavioral preparation. Now let's go to the next one in the red plank there across. And what does it mean to be emotionally prepared? It means that you've got to be able to forestall things like panic and anger and fear, right? And the only way to do that, because they come on so fast, is to have the confidence that comes with knowing that you're mentally and physically and behaviorally ready to handle the unexpected, right? When that happens, I can get that first little, hey, that's a snake, or anything else snake-like in life, and I can respond to it in a calm way before my emotions get the best of me. I have this huge chemical release of adrenaline into my body, which is going to shut off certain portions of my brain, and where do I go from there? Now I'm not prepared for anything. So emotionally, I want to be able to stay pretty much on an even keel, or I want to be able to ride that emotion for all it's worth, right? For example, fear is a very real thing for me because I still do not like snakes, right? And I know I'm going over the top with this metaphor on snakes, but consider my snake metaphor any twist of fate that you find yourself up against. But I still have a healthy fear of snakes, don't get me wrong. And I've never been bit by a rattlesnake, certainly don't want to get bit by a coral snake. They're much easier to identify because they're red, yellow, and black. They're also very nice snakes. They're not going to bite you unless you try to reach down and grab them. But knowing that they kill you when they do gives you a lot of respect when you see that banded snake in your yard. I usually don't even try to pick them up. I just get a little stick and scurry them off into the tall weeds. The fact that I am fearful of snakes, but not so fearful that it's going to shut down my entire system, allows me to approach what could be a dangerous situation with the appropriate amount of caution, right? I'm riding that small wave of fear toward a safer outcome. The last board on the shield there is the spiritual one. And the spiritual aspect of preparation, to me, is being able to connect myself to the larger world, cosmos. I realize that I am a very small speck of dust. I'm a small, tiny thing on a speck of dust we call the Earth that's floating through this incredibly large universe. I realize that, but I also realize that I am an important small speck of dust, and that my actions have consequences, not only now, but in my particular faith in the hereafter. All of that ties to that vertical word, purpose. Because I believe that I am here for a reason and that my actions matter, that I'm spiritually prepared, I tie that into a life purpose. And you've heard me give you my life purpose before, to help as many as I can, as many ways as I can, as many places as I can, for as long as I can. All of those things, having that purpose, having the mental, physical, behavioral, emotional, and spiritual readiness allows me to be prepared. And here's where I really like the metaphor, because when they all come together, they form into a fist. And if I do this right, it's going to look powerful, right? Coming right at you. I am able to attack the unknown, to attack when my assumptions go wrong and when my plans go wrong, because I am basically ready or as ready as I can be as a human being for anything. Now, there's still a lot of things that I'm probably going to lose fight against, right? But I've done all I can with what I have, which is kind of the baseline for this entire podcast. Grow where you are with the resources at hand. So that word preparation's got a lot of depth to it, right? Do we have the knowledge about something? Are we physically fit and well rested enough to handle a particular situation when our plans go awry? Have we developed the good habits? Can we keep an emotional keel that keeps us from tipping over? And do we have that purpose and that spiritual grounding to let us know that we may be small, but we're mighty, right? That's what preparation is. And it's why, in my humble opinion, it's so much more important than just planning. Now, in addition to this, it gives you a few key things. It gives you flexibility, even fluidity amidst the change. What if I go in there and I see that big snake and I start to pull it out? There's another snake. Because guess what? Snakes hunt snakes. And rat snakes eat rattlesnakes. So what if I pull that one away and suddenly I hear this thing? Okay, I'm flexible. I let the good snake go. I back up. I create a little bit of a plan, a backup plan, an alternative option. And then I say, yeah, too much for one person to handle. Or I say, nope, I can go in there and I can safely remove that rattlesnake. And then I'll come back and get the good snake later. Whatever. When you're flexible, because you're prepared, it allows you to build redundancy, right? Redundancy, what's that mean? It means backup plans, alternative options. And when you're also prepared, all those things, mentally, physically, behaviorally, emotionally, spiritually, with a purpose, it helps you to really enhance your situational awareness, because you're not sitting there trying to recall a bunch of stuff. You're already prepared, and your scan is wide and it's accurate. So you build that anticipation, that ability to adapt and respond to shifting conditions. Now, real world example, think of the Miracle on the Hudson with Captain Sullenberger, right? You've heard me say many times, I think 80% of the professional pilots in the world could have landed that airplane on the Hudson, but maybe only 2 or 3% could have made the decision to do so, because he had the preparation, all of those things, the things he knew, the things he'd practiced through glider. He flew gliders at the Air Force Academy. The emotional stability, all of that came together at that moment when Sully said, we're not going to Teterboro, we're putting it down on the Hudson, right? Miracle on the Hudson, truly a miracle of preparation. One great man's decision-making. He was prepared. He didn't have a plan for doing that. In fact, up until that time, airlines never practiced a ditching exercise from low altitude. Every simulator you get for ditching exercise, you're somewhere over the North Atlantic and you got a lot of time to run the checklist, right? Well, that plan didn't work, but his preparation did. And, just to tie into a lot of people that work in SWAT teams and special forces, they plan like crazy, but they know that plan is not going to last once they meet the enemy, right? The only guarantee is that the mission won't go as planned, but they're all prepared to adapt on the fly and still have the good outcome. So last thing I want to talk a little bit about, we'll go back to planning, is we can really fall in love with planning, and I think a lot of people overplan, right? People get stuck in the planning phase because if you're planning, you know what you're not doing? Doing anything. As long as I can plan, there's no risk to me. But when I have to execute it, I could be exposed, right? My planning wasn't good enough. My preparation wasn't good enough. Just realize this, the perfect plan never exists. So I like to go with 80%, if I can get it, of a plan, and then wing it. This podcast right now is a classic example of that. Had a little bit of an outline, thought about it for 30 minutes before we started to shoot this, and I just let it flow, because a perfect plan just doesn't exist. And you have to go out there and execute with partial information. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit, if we've all been taught to plan our whole lives, and not a lot of discussion or learning on broad-based preparation, right? Which once again you can get from Armored Knight. How do we shift? How do we create that mindset shift from what we've been taught? Man, you got to have a plan, and that'll be enough, to preparation. Stop looking for a perfect plan and start thinking about, what if everything goes wrong, right? What if everything goes wrong and I'm unable to execute against this plan? Is there still a way forward, right? Is there still a way forward? And that will begin to open your mind up, open your aperture up, and say, yeah, I could do this, but only if I was prepared in this way. I could do that, but only if I was prepared in that way. And then trust me, those 5 things, man, mental, physical, emotional, behavioral, spiritual, and purpose, will serve you well. There's not a lot more than that to being prepared. So when you have those things, right, you can build resilience, and you can plan on being resilient in any scenario, right? And you develop that mental agility to say, okay, what now? Here's the next step. Here's the next step. One of the absolute most brilliant things I've ever heard was there was a reporter who asked Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon, one of these sort of philosophical questions. And the question was, Mr. Armstrong, if you were on the moon and you suddenly had something, developed a leak in your spacesuit and knew you only had 10 minutes to live, what would you do, right? And he was expecting something really profound, and he got it. He said, I would plan for 9 minutes and then execute the plan, right? So here was a guy who understood what resilience looked like. And then when you're given a weird thing, man, you've just popped a leak in your spacesuit, what do? And his first thought was, I'm going to think about it. I'm going to analyze the situation. I'm going to take the appropriate action, and then I'm going to execute it. Do you think in 9 minutes time or 8 minutes time, he'd come up with a perfect plan? Probably not, but he could come up with a plan. And from there, he can change his emotions. He's physiologically ready. He's got courage, and he executes it, right? So that's one thing. It builds resilience. The second thing is when you anticipate the wrongness of something, when you say, what if there are 2 snakes? What if there's 3 snakes, right? You can start thinking about contingency options, right? You can start building plans, albeit not the most detailed plan you're going to fall in love with, right? But just thinking it through, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, right? And the plan D for me is always, in every situation, I'm going to fall back to a safe position. I'm going to get myself and other people out of harm's way. And from there, I can live fight another day, right? The last thing I think to shift from this mindset is to anticipate unpredictability. Things change. Things that are outside of our control are outside of our control. And when we know that, we can begin to not be so frustrated when things don't go as planned, and actually smile at the opportunity that it presents for us, right? I have had multiple times in my life and career, both as an aviator and as a business person, even as a Little League coach, when I had a really good plan going in, and I didn't allow myself to be overwhelmed when things went sideways. I was able to improvise, adapt, and overcome because I'd prepared myself to do so ahead of that thing happening, right? And I'm still alive to talk a little bit about it and even share some insights with you about the difference between planning and preparation. So let's finish up here by just recapping a couple of key points here. Planning is based on the assumption of order, and preparation assumes chaos. Rigid plans fail, but preparation allows you to adapt when your plans fall apart. And finally, I think the most successful people, long-term for sure, the most successful organizations and teams prioritize preparation over planning. They make sure their people are knowledgeable, right? That they are happy and engaged so that their emotional control is there. They help them to develop good habits. They give them purpose, right? And then they leave them alone so that they can do their work. It's not about detailed plans. There's something out there called behavioral-based safety, which is do it this way and only this way. Right? To me, that is fraught with peril, because when something goes different than assumed, that's the only way they know how to react, right? And it no longer applies. So final thought, ask yourself, the next time you sit down to plan something, are you just planning it, or are you also thinking about being truly prepared? Because when the moment comes, you really won't have time to replan or maybe even adjust that plan. You'll only have time to execute in that moment with the preparation that you've brought to the table. As they say, you have to play with the cards you're dealt. So I'd like to thank you for joining us here on episode 68. If any of this stuff resonated with you, please share it with somebody you think needs to hear it. As always, keep pushing forward, because in the end, we're all only human. And I will see you soon.